Before filming begins, I always hope above all to make a beautiful film. Then, as the first difficulties arise, I lower my sights and I'm satisfied simply to get the film completed. The actors are comfortable in their roles. The crew is together. Personal problems will have to wait. The film is king.
Your friendly fuddy-duddy film professor is here to talk to you about the wonderful world of distribution. I've had some questions posed to me about what distribution actually is. Well, distribution is actually the most important part of the filmmaking process. And I would not have said this 30 years ago when I first got into the business. In fact, the whole business side of the entertainment industry baffled me and kind of filled me with dread and fear and intimidation. And for some reason, now that I'm teaching, that's all I ever talk about. In fact, I just finished running a grant where my whole thing was to teach people who are in film classes the whole concept of how to get your stuff sold. So it is an integral part of the filmmaking process. And the more you can understand about how distribution works, the better off you are. And please don't think that you are somehow selling out because you're thinking of practical considerations in addition to your creative ones. In fact, look at it as a limitation, because what is it that Hollywood has always done best throughout its myriad decades of existence? And that is, it's looked on a limitation and said, how can I get around it? And in the process of getting around it, they have created some of the greatest spectacles and created some of the most innovative movies, whether it be the production code, which said, oh, you can't use certain ideas or phrases or types of characters, and yet you look at a lot of the movies made during the code period, it totally shattered it. Or, oh, well, you can't possibly make a person fly on camera. And okay, by the silent era, that was well handled. So the challenges are always part of the creativity, and distribution should be looked at as just that, another challenge. So let's talk about what is distribution. Distribution is the process by which you take a project that, once it's finished, is put out in the marketplace. And this is, of course, very fearful for most filmmakers. And in fact, they'll spend all of their time on the creativity and none on what's going to happen when it's done. It's almost as if, and this is where film schools are at fault, it's almost as if film schools are teaching people that the Field of Dreams movie is correct. Build it and they will come. In some cases, that's true. In most cases, it's not. First of all, if you want to build something, you want to make sure there are people who will come. And that sounds like the most intimidating and uncreative part of it. It's actually the easy part. Like, let's say, for example, you want to make a horror movie. Why is it you want to make a horror movie? Most of the time, it's because you like horror movies. So guess what? If you already like horror movies, there's your audience. It already exists, and it's you. So you can look at your horror film and say, okay, what part of horror movies do I particularly like? Do I like the bigger ones, the more extensive budget, such as A Haunting of Hill House, or do I like the more independent Jason Blum type pictures like Get Out? Because there's very serious differences between those two separate types of movies. So what you would do, and this is primarily to people who have the fortune to live in the Los Angeles area, what you want to do is, first of all, look to see who's making the kinds of movies you want to see and that you, in fact, want to make. And study what they have done. Look at what their output has been. If you can find articles about them, and please don't tell me you can't find this material, because it is available now, because God knows you have the internet. You don't have to go to the library the way us old codgers had to do, or even deal with a card catalog system. So no, it's much easier now. So find somebody whose work you like and see how they did it. Be aware that the industry is always going through changes, but that doesn't really mean anything except it's just another challenge for you to face. Again, using the example of horror, because that's the one genre that people seem to feel is the easiest way in. Let's start with the negatives of that type of thinking. Number one, do you love the genre? If the answer is yes, you're good. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a first movie as a horror. If your answer is no, don't make a horror movie. There's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of horror movies being made, especially on the lower end and especially by people who don't like the genre. Those are called dead assets because they will not deliver to what an audience likes. Number two, once you have determined that you like the genre and it's one you want to make, then think about how much money you think you can scare up to make it. Please don't try to make it on credit cards. That's a big mistake. Now, I know there's certain people in film school who are probably making their student projects on credit cards, and God knows when I was going for my master's, that's kind of what I did, even though that's not a wise thing. But it wasn't also a lot of money. So you've got to think, do I have an opportunity to make 20% a year return on the money I'm spending on this? And if the answer is no, then I'm going to suggest very strongly that you hold off on your production a little bit. And one of the reasons for that is that this is a very social business. So the best way to be successful is to kind of be in with people socially and have the opportunity come to you rather than you chase after it. What do I mean by that? I mean, and this is, I know, you're going to say, I just spent $200,000 getting a film degree. Why would I take a lower level job? You take a lower level job because your degree does not get you a job. What your degree does is it prepares you for your promotion. In fact, in a lot of the career tech educational fields, that is exactly what your degree does. It helps you get a promotion, but you have to get in the front door. What's the easiest way to get in the front door of distribution? I hate to say it, the easiest way is to know Microsoft Office. Know Excel, know Word, know Outlook. Now, I know that there's a lot of younger people and, in fact, college teachers who think that Outlook is passé and gone and forgotten. They are wrong. In fact, a lot of the temporary agencies that I worked with during the time of the grant said that that's the number one reason for people not getting a job, is because they don't know Outlook. So they can't place them at studios and in assistant pools. And that really is the way in. Now, let's say that you do have a good proficiency in all of these programs. Get a job at a studio through a temporary agency. Not a studio, but a production company. Why? Because there's so many things that you don't know. And in the process of working in the field, of getting to see the contracts that come through, of being able to maybe even listen in on negotiations, you will learn a heck of a lot. And as a development person, I learned from the ground up how important it is to understand how distribution fits into the entire picture. And so I had that opportunity because I was on the inside. So yes, go in there, plan to spend a couple of years working on the inside so you get to learn the ins and outs. What is an option deal? What is a pickup deal? What are they looking for? What are some of the reasons why a company might say no to a movie and say yes to another? These are all things that will help you be able to take your project and find the right niche for it. And you might say, well, I don't have 2 years. I've got to make the money back right now, or my relatives are going to put my feet into a vat of cement and throw me in the LA River. Oh, well, you shouldn't have done that. But either way, there are still strategies for how you can find out how to get your film out there. Go to film festivals. Now, people look at film festivals the wrong way. They look at film festivals as a way to get their film seen and win a prize, and then from there on, the doors will be open and people will be handing them contracts. No, they won't. The reason you go to a film festival is because there's a lot of people there who are in distribution. You do not go up to them and start pitching your project. What you do is you see if you can get their card. You be very, very nice and obsequious. And you say, can I contact you after the festival is over? And most of the time, the answer will be yes. And at least with email, you can contact them that way and remind them where you met them. And at that point, you will have seen how the company that you approached interacts with other companies. You'll have had a chance to see oh, are these people jerks or are they actually approachable? If they're approachable, do they actually have any heat, or are they people who are just as desperate as you are and they just got in there because they spent the $700 to get a day pass? So there's a lot of ways that you can that you can suss out a distribution company on your own. Remember, the goal of a film festival is to meet other people in distribution, not to get your film picked up, or heaven forbid, not to win. Winning isn't really going to get you anything. Okay, I know I'm going to have a lot of people scream at me for that, but it's true. The win is not the point. The relationships you build through going is. Because what else are you seeing? You're seeing the posters, you're seeing the other stuff that people are doing, you're hearing the buzz. What are people interested in buying? What is the project that people really got enthusiastic about? When you know that, and even if your film is in the can, guess what? You have gotten some hints on how you can promote it. And what do I mean by you've gotten some hints on how you can promote it? Well, let's say that you've made a horror movie and it's a gothic horror piece and it's period and all of that. And you're around there and you're hearing all of these people talking about how, oh, you know, we're not into traditional ghost stories. We're into only modern slasher torture porn and all of that. And yet you're hearing the people around you talking about how they really love the old Hammer films and even the Universal ones. And oh, isn't it exciting that the Universal's come out with that whole Blu-ray pack now? And oh, you know, Horror of Dracula was just remastered in Blu-ray. Aha, you now have a piece of information that maybe some of the distributors didn't have. So as you are looking at your horror film, you figure out how it fits in with what the modern sensibility is, combined with what you have heard in terms of what the audience is. So even though you have a film that you know a distributor might not buy because it's not torture porn, it's instead gothic horror, you will be invited back for another meeting. And that's the important thing as well. The ability to be invited in for a second meeting is key. The goal of every meeting is to have another meeting. It's not necessarily to close the deal. The chances that you're going to have absolutely the perfect film, absolutely the perfect script for whatever company you're pitching is almost nil. But if you make that relationship, they might drop a dime and call a friend who happens to be looking for your type of film or script. They might invite you to come back and pitch something, and hey, it's at least a check. They might really like you, so you might have walked yourself into a job. There's any number of ways that these relationships can be built. Now, let's take that example of you have a horror film that's more gothic and more ghostly, and everyone says that they want slasher horror and they want torture porn. So you go in with a meeting knowing that you have something that they're not going to really want. And you say, hey, you know what? I have this film. It's a little bit off genre, but hey, look at how well Jason Blum did when he was doing traditional blue guy with a sheet over his head creating horror. And I know that this is not necessarily your target right now, but it has really good suspense scenes. It's got a really good play on the audience. And as you know, I've been on a lot of websites and I've been to a lot of these horror festivals, and I've been following it. And there's people out there who actually like this type of old school horror. And even if they're looking at you and saying, well, this person's full of you know what, but I kind of like the fact that they understood what my business model is and what I needed and how they weren't necessarily delivering it, I might be willing to have them pitch to me their version of a torture porn because they might be able to combine the elements of a traditional ghost story with that. And if you're really well versed in what you're talking about, you might mention a lot of the J-horror and Chinese horror and all of that, that even though it's not necessarily number one in fashion now, it's at least out there. So it's building that relationship. It's building that sense of trust between two people who are industry professionals. And it's an ability to grow. If you're also aware of holes in the market that you feel that your film or your TV series could fill, that's another big plus. Please don't go by what you're reading in the trades, because the trades are basically propaganda. They're people putting out news in many instances because they're coming to the end of a quarter, let's say, and they need to make sure that there's in print evidence that they're moving in the right direction, and even if they're not. So a lot of times what you're seeing in the trade press isn't necessarily true. The other thing is to be a good listener. If you're in the room with someone who is doing a type of film that you're somewhat keen on, but you don't happen to have something that fits their needs, ask them how they got to where they are. There's nothing that inspires people to think you're a genius as much as you being interested in what they did and how they got to where they are. So here's your opportunity to actually meet with them and have them tell you how they did it. Now, they might give you nothing but publicity speak, but the more you are aware of their past, the more details you have on the kind of movies they make, the more you're interested in their upcoming projects, guess what? The more likely it is that they're going to tell you information that you might find to be key to go someplace else. And finally, at the end of the meeting, saying it goes well. If it goes bad, of course, you thank them very much, send them a thank you card the next day, regular card, do not send an email. And hopefully it'll be okay at some point in the future because you follow through and you were polite and unusual for what many people perceive to be young people, even though it's not necessarily true. Every generation's been pretty much the same. What you might do is you might ask them if the meeting's gone well, if they have a couple of other people that you can talk with and maybe get some information. If you happen to still be in film school, and I'm not telling you this is disclosure, I'm not recommending you do this, this is in no way a recommendation, or am I speaking for Los Angeles Valley College, Loyola Marymount University, the California Community College Chancellor's Office, or Los Angeles Community College District. I'm not speaking for any of those people, I'm just speaking for Dan, okay? The other thing that you can do is if you're still in film school, use the name of the film school, tell them that you have this evil professor who has given you an assignment that you need to meet with 3 people in the industry. You're not going to pitch them anything, you just want an informational interview. It won't take more than 10 or 15 minutes, and get some information on how they got to be where they are and how they decide what movies they're going to greenlight. Very often, I'm not saying even 50%, but very often, because you are coming in as a student, they will be willing to meet with you, especially if you let them know clearly that you're not trolling for a job. That will come later. Not right away later either, but down the road. And many times that job offer will come from them to you. So trust me, this is a way of doing it. And again, this is not, I'm speaking only for Dan, I'm not speaking for anyone else. So this is a strategy. Today, we're going to continue what we were talking about in terms of distribution. But what I want to do is I want to talk about how you should even think about putting together your first project. And my answer for that is you're not going to do a first project. What you're going to do is you're going to, first of all, come up with a production company and a slate of films. Now, why would I suggest doing that rather than a la carting it, doing it one film at a time? Let's talk about it in terms of time management. In order to do an a la carte version, first of all, you're going to be writing your script. While you're writing your script, you could actually be coming up with the business plan along with some of your friends and other people that you want to work with. And that way, you're kind of doing 2 things at once. Plus, you also have an opportunity then to go out and see what it is that people are buying right now. Now, I know that that's totally unartistic and it's probably very unromantic as well, but it's the best way to be able to not end up with an asset that you can't do anything with. Plus, when you go out there and you're talking to people about multiple projects, there tends to be a general sense that you're far more serious than someone who's doing one at a time. One at a time is often misconstrued, perhaps, as something of a hobby, and that you're an outsider who's trying to get in, and you don't really understand how the business works. Because what happens, if you're going to do it a la carte, at the very beginning, you're going to write the script and put together the funding. Then you're going to cast and you're going to put together the film with whatever crew. You're going to shoot it. It's going to go into post. Then after it's done with post, You're probably going to enter it into a number of festivals. Then at the end of that period, hopefully you'll make a sale. Very good chance that you might not. I hate to be negative about it, but hey, that's the truth. And then, saying you do make a sale and you do somehow get your money back, then you start the process all over again, meaning that you're going to be starting out with looking for a concept, writing the script, finding the money, all of that. Wouldn't it be much better if instead of doing one script at a time, you planned, let's say, to do 5? First of all, when you're going to something like the American Film Market, the AFM, which is held every year, when you go in there with more than one project, you have people's ears a little bit better. They'll be more willing to listen to a number of different projects as opposed to just one. Because if they don't like that one, then you're probably out of luck with that company, especially if you're dead set on making it and you've probably already started a little bit of the production. No, go in with the 5. Find out which ones they like. I'm not saying that making business arrangements with your friends is a good idea, especially if you plan on keeping them afterwards. But starting with people whose work ethic you already know, starting with people that you've worked with in the past is always beneficial because you at least know what they're not capable of doing and you're not going to expect them to do that which they are not good at. By the way, they're going to be looking the same way at you. They're going to see whether or not you're someone they want to work with in the future, whether or not you're a crazy egomaniac who's out of control. So you really want to make sure that you have a sense. And trust me, if you go out there and you actually have money on the line and it's at that moment that you realize that none of you can work together, guess what? You will probably never work again. Because if somebody else has given you money to make this film and it turns out to be a massive disaster, they're not going to give you the money again. It's going to be a wasted opportunity, and then you'll have to go back to your day job. And none of us want to do that, if I'm not mistaken. So come up with a slate of films. In fact, with your other partners, each of you might be able to come up with one. This is actually the way I teach one of my classes, is that I break the class into numerous groups, and I assign each group a budget, and each one of the members gets to come up with their own addition to it, or if one person happens to be a group leader and wants to come up with all 5, that's fine too. And I also give them one from the outside. I give each group the same project from the outside, so at the end of the semester, we can take a look at how each member or each of the teams came up with how they would handle the exact same project from a variety of different budget levels. It's very instructive to actually see that, because something that can be done for $20 million is very different from that same script being engineered to be done for, let's say, $250,000. And there's a lot of changes that you would make changing one into the other. So it's a good practice for you to do with whoever is in your production company as well, because more likely than not, each of you has a different idea of what is an ideal picture. And believe it or not, even if all of your ideas seem to be from Mars relative to each other, then there's still an opportunity for you to work together, because now you have a diversity of product, and you can tie that diversity of product to who each of you is. So when you're going out there and doing a presentation, you're actually helping to brand who you are. In this era of people wanting content that's coming from a lot of different perspectives and with a lot of more diverse content, it's always good to reinforce that, to show that you're not only a one-trick pony, if you will. So that if you're going out there with a bunch of people and each of you has relatively different stories, how do you tie them all together? Well, that's easy too. The way you tie them together is that, believe it or not, the reason you're hanging with your friends is you probably share certain values with them. So figure out what those values are. And sooner or later, as you're looking at each of your stories, you're going to find that there's a similarity. I mean, we could go back. Okay, let's go back so that we're not treading on anyone's sensitivities about movies that were made in the past year. But let's say you went back to 1978 and pretended that you were in charge of 20th Century Fox, which had just done a phenomenal release with Star Wars. What were some of the movies that were made the year after? Well, two of them in particular were An Unmarried Woman and Alien. And you would think, oh, okay, there's no similarity between these two movies. And there you would be wrong. Actually, 20th Century Fox was grappling with its own internal transition where it would become much more of a big budget and flying glass no-brainer oriented company. But it was also one that traditionally, and we're talking about going all the way back to the 30s, Darryl F. Zanuck had always been an executive who believed in making stories that meant something to the public, whether it be infidelity in a small town, covered in Peyton Place and A Letter to Three Wives, one of them comedy, one of them a drama, or you're looking at war through the lens of Patton and MASH, which were both nominated for Best Picture the same year, and both from Fox. And you would think that they're very different, but they're not, because they're both about iconoclastic characters. What's the similarity between Alien and An Unmarried Woman? Well, from a corporate standpoint, they're both about very individualistic and strong women who are put into a challenging situation, and they need to figure a way out. They need to figure out a way to survive when their world has been turned upside down. In Ripley's case, her world is turned upside down when her captain is an idiot and lets an alien onto the ship because he cares too much about one of the crew members. Whereas Ripley, who was coming across as hard, actually could have saved everyone's life if she hadn't been overridden by Ash, who ultimately, of course, turns out to be a robot. So she was right. In An Unmarried Woman, we have Erica, who has had her nice world upset when her husband leaves her. There's a betrayal there. In the same way that the crew of the Nostromo realize that the government had them as, or the corporation has them as pawns to lure the aliens. So each of the characters has to deal with their newfound self. So you, as an independent producer coming up with your own production company, need to do the same thing. What is the common element between things that seem completely separated from one another? Because believe it or not, every company has a theme, and that theme is reflected in a lot of their movies. And this is why when a company goes off the rails and starts making a movie that nobody wants to see or is disappointment to the audience, it is so hard to change directions. Look at what happened with Sony when, for a while there, Amy Pascal and her cohorts were trying to be preachers almost to their audience, and they decided to feminize masculine genres. That was a mistake. It's like, stop thinking that you're all that. Your job as a production company is to deliver a message. And you, as an independent producer with your friends, can get together and come up with what is your angle, what is your way of getting your message out there. Now, because I teach at a community college as well as Loyola Marymount, I've had the ability to work with students from a variety of different backgrounds. And what's fascinating to me is to watch how you have people of different ethnicities getting together and still having the same basic story, even though they're coming from many different backgrounds. And that story can be filtered through individual lenses. That's why I'm feeling so happy that so many of them are going out there and doing their own independent productions. And I do suggest that they come up with a slate rather than one, because if nothing else, it keeps the momentum going in a meeting. So the bottom line on this particular video is, please don't plan on a la carte. Plan on doing a series of films. They can be all different topics, but they will have a consistency. Find what that consistency is. Highlight it, because that will be your ticket.